There we go. Your Excellencies, dear friends, a good morning to you all and to our online audience. A good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be celebrating International Women's Day. And congratulations to all of you, to all of us. You're all warmly welcome to the International Peace Institute for today's event entitled Inside Afghanistan's Gender Apartheid. And we are particularly thrilled that Malala is with us here today. And that her fund and the Atlantic Council are our co-partners, along with the co-sponsorship of the Global Justice Center, Rawadari, the Georgetown Institute of Women, Peace and Security, the government of Malta, and the government of Mexico. Today's event is important. It aims to reinforce a momentum that was begun a long time ago, and Professor Andrews was telling me it really began in 2012. And there is no question that the treatment of women and girls in Afghanistan is an abomination. Of that, there is no doubt. But I have to confess, as someone who once led the negotiations on the elements of crimes that falls within the Rome Statute, and was president of the governing body of the International Criminal Court, and was a former High Commissioner for Human Rights. While I am sliding toward being convinced of this new crimes incorporation into the draft Treaty on Crimes Against Humanity, largely because of the persuasive skills of Professor Rangita de Silva de Alves and Catherine Amirfar, I'm not there yet, nor are others well acquainted with these types of crimes. So your job, therefore, today is to make the case to us, sort of moderately skeptics, and to drive the point with such energy. So basically our sliding comes to an end, and we are fully convinced. And seeing who we have with us today, a gallery of truly distinguished participants, I sort of suspect that by the end of this particular session, you will succeed, and whoever remains as a skeptic will be fully convinced. So now let's turn our attention to an opening video. Please, if you could show the video.
My name is Malala. My name is Mina.
My name is Layla.
My name is Mujda.
My name is Habib.
My name is Soraya.
My name is Hila.
Before the Taliban's rise to power, I was the principal of a private school, and I was in charge of the education of both boys and girls from grades 1 to 9. It was a hard job, but I loved it. In the first few months after the Taliban's takeover, I tried to be hopeful, telling my family that things would get better. Maybe the Taliban needed time to settle and adjust. That's normal, I would say. But each new rule felt like a noose tightening around our lives. Women are ordered to stay indoors because Taliban soldiers are not trained to respect women. Women must cover their faces at all times in public. Women must stay at home. Women should not work. Girls were banned from schools. The shapes and sounds of girls and women evaporated from our streets.
When the decree was announced in December 2022, I was a third-year medical student. It didn't stop my education. It felt like a door slamming shut on my future. Now, instead of studying, I am trapped at home.
Now, I have no income. Even worse, I have no mahram or male guardian. So it is hard for me to even access humanitarian aid for my children.
3 years ago, I took a big chance, a big risk. I left my home, my family, my community to chase my dreams in Kabul as an artist. I found a community and joined an artist collective. But in the shadows of our hopes were whispers of fear. The ongoing talks with the Taliban felt like a dark cloud. Friends, family, everyone discussed it, fearing what their return might mean. But deep down, we believed that the international community was with us, that they wouldn't give away our hard work, our rights. I feel embarrassed for thinking that now.
In Afghanistan, our culture is full of music and poetry. It's everywhere and in everything we do. I grew up in a family where music was our heartbeat. At every celebration, there was always singing, always joy expressed to music. When the Taliban took over, my family was so worried that they collected all our instruments, my keyboard too, and took it to my school. They were too afraid to keep it in the house. I cried for a week after that.
My sister Laila has been organizing protests against these restrictions with her friends. I don't want to limit her, but I'm scared and terrified of the consequences if she's seen or recognized. As her brother, my heart breaks. What do I do? Do I support her? Do I ask her to remain unseen to ensure our family's safety? I dream for the day Laila can be free again, to finish her school and chase her dreams, and to let the world see her brilliance. For now, I stand beside her in her fight for our country.
We are fighting every day to make our voice heard, to reclaim the future that has been taken away.
We women are bearing the burden of this failed war. First, our brothers, fathers, sons, and husbands were killed to get rid of the Taliban. Now we are being starved and erased because our country was handed back to the Taliban. We are fighting back every day. In small and big ways, we are refusing to be silenced, to be erased. My name is Soraya. I exist, and this is my country too.
I would like to now give the floor to Her Excellency Alicia Buenrostro Macio, the Ambassador and Deputy Permanent Representative of Mexico to the United Nations. Alicia, please.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here this morning with all of you. If you could see from where I am standing right now, the group, you could see and feel the vibe, the energy. So happy Women's Day. Excellencies, esteemed colleagues, advocates for gender equality, feminists, good morning to all of you. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Atlantic Council for organizing this event and on this significant occasion in feminist history, International Women's Day. If there was ever a day to convene for this discussion, it is undoubtedly today. Today's event features a remarkable array of panelists, and you can tell, from activists to academics and seasoned experts. I extend my sincere gratitude to Dr. Dorothy Estrada Tank, to activist Nayera Kistani, to Professor Penelope Andrews, and Professor Said Rad Al-Hussein for joining us here today. I also acknowledge the presence of Nobel Peace Prize laureate Malala Yousafzai, who showed us and continues to show, as we will witness today, bravery and commitment to protect the rights of women and girls worldwide. I am deeply honored to stand among such distinguished trailblazers as yourselves, and Mexico, a country guided by a feminist foreign policy and resolute in achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, is proud to co-sponsor this event. Colleagues and dear friends, today we gather here with a shared commitment to gender equality and the advancement of women's rights worldwide. We gather here because halfway through the 2030 agenda, gender equality is at stake. We are not on track to achieve gender equality by 2030. In fact, we are not on track to achieve gender equality for the next 286 years, as data from UN Women shows. Trends, as predicted, have shown us not only that gender equality will not be reached in almost 300 years, but that by 2030, more than 342 million women and girls could be living in extreme poverty, excluded from a decent standard of living. We are also here because we are deeply concerned about the ongoing pushback women's rights are facing worldwide. from setbacks in sexual and reproductive health rights to a rise in gender-based violence and the systematic exclusion of women from public life in Afghanistan and many other places. The pushback is intensifying. And so must our response. Thus, we are here because we want to reverse these trends. The exclusion of women and girls must stop being a consistent part of history. For centuries, historical exclusion of women has restricted their participation in all spheres of life, from education to politics to voting. Years ago, for example, the idea of us being here would have been difficult to imagine. The notion of women serving as diplomats, activists, experts, and professors would be complicated, right? But we have overcome these obstacles in the past, and we can overcome the exclusion women and girls are facing today as well. So it is high time to do so. It is time to rewrite the narrative, making the meaningful, equal, safe, and full participation of women and girls in all aspects of society, not the exception, but the rule in history. The full inclusion of women is not only a moral and fair imperative, but also an engine of progress and development. By including women in education and other aspects of society, it not only promotes justice and equity, but also sustainability. It is indeed a fact that gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls is necessary to achieve progress across all the Sustainable Development Goals, a point that was reaffirmed in Resolution 78/150 presented by my country during this period of sessions of the General Assembly to the Second Committee. Sorry. And as Malala herself has highlighted, everyone would benefit from every girl having access to safe, quality, and free education because keeping girls aside affects the whole world. So in this sense, today's discussion will shed light on one of the most pressing issues of our time. Delving into terms like gender apartheid demands to be brought to the table as a meaningful, full, and equal participation of women and girls in all aspects of society should be prioritized. Thus, it is imperative to discuss language that upholds these principles now. Today's discussion is a stepping stone to reverse trends, to understand what is going on and what we need to change. By working together through dialogue with international law and diplomats, we are developing the tools we need to keep pushing forward. That is why events like the one today are paramount. Today, we will benefit from the insights of experts to make this of World One, where human rights are upheld. I'm so sorry. Today, yeah, I think it's good. Today, we will benefit from the insights of experts to make this a world one where human rights are upheld for all without distinction, as the United Nations Charter highlights, one where all human are treated free and equal in dignity and rights, as the first article of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights emphasizes, and one where we can see every girl in school by 2030. I would like to end my remarks by quoting the feminist Mexican diplomat and poet Rosario Castellanos, who in one of her poetry books titled Notes for a Declaration of Faith wrote, "In this agonizing land, sure, we can sow a hope." So for us, for millions of women and girls all over the world, you, Malala, are a seed of hope. Thank you.
I'm hoping the mic works. Good morning. My name is Jumana Karache. I'm a CNN international correspondent. It's a privilege and an honor to be here with you on this International Women's Day. I will be moderating this panel, and throughout, please start thinking about your questions, because after we have our discussion here, we will be opening up the floor for questions and taking questions from our audience online as well. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in August of 2021, the world watched in shock and in horror as the Taliban took over power again in Afghanistan. It was on our newscasts every day. It was on the front pages of our newspapers. It was what many would talk about on social media. But here we are, nearly 3 years on, and sadly, the situation in Afghanistan, the crisis in Afghanistan that the women, the girls, and the people of Afghanistan are facing has sadly become another forgotten crisis. As the world's focus has shifted elsewhere to the many global crises that are on the minds of so many right now, the girls and women of Afghanistan feel abandoned, as you heard right there in the video. And they have been left to bravely fight for their most basic of rights on their own, as they are facing a de facto authority that, according to the United Nations, is more determined than ever to erase women and girls from public life. And while the world's attention has been focused elsewhere, the Taliban, since their takeover in 2021, have issued dozens of decrees that have directly curtailed the rights and dignity of women. Before coming here today, I was reading one of the most recent joint UN agencies reports where they spoke to more than 700 women. And one of the, there were many shocking statistics in there. And one of those was that more than half, nearly 60% of women right now and girls say that they are too afraid to leave their homes without a mahram, a male guardian. Let that sink in. More than half are too afraid to leave their homes because they are girls, because they are women. Today, I'm joined here by 4 remarkable women who, in their different roles, have been working to shine a light on what is happening, what the women and girls of Afghanistan are facing, and to try and mobilize support for the girls and women of Afghanistan and for the world to recognize what is unfolding as gender apartheid and to make it a crime against humanity. So I'd like to welcome you all to this panel, and I will be giving a very brief bio just because of the time constraints here. Nayira Kohistani is a women's rights defender and teacher. Before the Taliban takeover, she was working with private schools, including the Kardan School. She was imprisoned by the Taliban along with her family members. I believe your 2 young children, they were 3 and 7 at the time, for organizing demonstrations after the group returned to power. Professor Penelope Andrews is a racial justice and anti-apartheid expert and John Marshall Harlan II Professor and Director of the Racial Justice Project at New York Law School. She's also former Dean, University of Cape Town, Faculty of Law, and a former acting judge of the North Gauteng Division of the High Courts of South Africa. Malala Yousafzai is the co-founder, executive chair, and UK trustee of the Malala Fund. She is a Pakistani activist, student, UN Messenger of Peace, and the youngest person ever awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Dorothy Estrada Tank is the chair of the UN Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls, as well as assistant professor of public relations, law and international relations at the Faculty of Law, University of Murcia, Spain, and director of its legal clinic. She's an international human rights law and gender equality expert with 15 years of professional experience with the Mexican government, the UN, among others. Welcome to all of you. And if I could start with you, Nayira. You left Afghanistan in March 2022, but you lived under the Taliban's rule the first time and the second time. And I can't even imagine what a difficult decision it was to finally leave your home and your country behind. Can you paint a picture of what the situation is like right now on the ground, what the women, girls, and others in Afghanistan are facing, and why have you and many other Afghan women mobilized around gender apartheid recognition? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I appreciate your. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak today. I came to this panel from a different place, as you mentioned, from Taliban prison. First of all, I want to share my experience as an Afghan woman who fight for the women's rights. Before the Taliban took over in August 2021, I was a history teacher. I taught in the morning and took care of my 2 children in the afternoon. Overnight, I was stripped of every single basic right and reduced to a second-class citizen. I lost the right to work, and my daughter, like million girls in Afghanistan, lost the right to go to school. The Taliban treated us as objects with no human agency or dignity. I joined with hundreds of other women on the streets to protest against this dehumanization by the Taliban. All of us women come from very different backgrounds. A teacher, a police officer, a civil servant, a librarian, married, widowed, single, poor, and rich. While we were all different, we shared 2 things. We were all women, and we lost our basic fundamental rights. Basically, as a woman, the Taliban had criminalized our whole existence and identity. They issued over 95 decrees to target women. I was threatening, but it was just for me. But it was not just about myself. I felt responsible towards oh, I'm sorry. My beautiful daughter, Raha. I'm so sorry. As someone who had experienced domestic violence, I had named her Raha, which Raha means free. Free from any kind of restriction. Any kind of restriction that every woman experiences in years in Afghanistan. Oh, I'm so sorry. I stood up for that promise. I remember that the first day when I started to protest in front of Shahrana Park, I can express how bad it still feels. Standing physically against them face to face. I didn't know it was fear or excitement, but I couldn't sleep at night. I would wake up every morning, pack my bag, get my sign that my husband drew with slogans of bread, work, freedom, which it means in Dari or in Persian, non, kar, azadi. And then went on the streets. On the streets, we were met with electric shocks, shooting, lashing, pepper spray, and beating. After a few days, we were unable to go home as they started following us to the timers. We continued protesting during the day and hiding at night. 16 of us were hiding in a safe house. The Taliban raided and imprisoned all of us, with our family members, especially 7 children. They imprisoned me with my son, my 3-year-old daughter, Raha, my husband. In here, we have 12 other protesters, my hero sisters, Tamana Rezai and Suraya Haidari. Can you stand up, please? Clap for. Thank you. We continue protesting sorry. Every time when I close my eyes, I still hear the screams of children, girls, boys, women, and men from the Taliban's prison. They forced us to give confession videos. That was too much hard. I couldn't explain it in here. I don't want to make it more tragedy. Yeah, this is Women's Day, and we must be happy. Yeah. One point that I want to say you, they forced us to say that Mitra Mehran, that she is here. Thank you. And to others, fellow women had encouraged us to protest, to get out of the country. They did this to delegitimize and our protest, delegitimize us and our protest, and to say that our demands for basic rights was something alien, not local. For the Taliban, women are not equal human rights. This belief is at the center of their ideological movement. So women asking for rights is out of question, and it's a crime. There have also been cases of torture and gang rape widely reported by human rights organizations. Some women protesters were even killed and their bodies threw in the streets to serve as deterrent for others. These kinds of atrocity are also happening against previous military personnel. Really, anyone who not seen as an ally of the Taliban or who's seen as a threat to the regime. As I speaking here, two of my fellow protesters are in the Taliban prison by the name of Manija Siddiqui and Khatira Takhori. As you may know, most Taliban terrorists target women, These are not just simple policies. They are enforced violently on us. The fear they have imposed, the violence enforcement of their oppression that has taken everything from women and girls, has effectively written Afghanistan into an open prison. It can be understood by any single act or mechanism, as you heard in this idea of women and girls at the beginning of the event. This is it is systematic, and it must be recognized for what it is. It's a gender apartheid. Thank you for sharing.
Naira, thank you very much. I know it's not easy, and I think everyone here and so many others would really appreciated you speaking up and speaking for those who I can't get their voices out today. So thank you very much for, really painting this really grim picture of what is going on the ground and reminding us that it's not just issuing these decrees. The Taliban is violently enforcing these decrees right now. That is something of real concern for so many who are watching the situation on the ground. Penny, I wanted to turn to you here. Hearing what Naira said, you are at the forefront of the anti-apartheid movement and resistance in South Africa. What similarities, if any, do you see to what's happening and unfolding right now in Afghanistan? And why have you joined the calls to expand racial apartheid to encompass gender apartheid?
Thank you. Yes, let me just start by saying how delighted I am on this International Women's Day to be in the company of such esteemed colleagues and all of you. So I really am very pleased. I'm going to just make 3 points, basically. The first point is to answer your question directly, how I got here. And the second, why I became involved. And the third is to go to my position as a lawyer, as a law professor. What is the evidence? And have I stated my case? I'm sorry to follow you. You evoke such a poignant reminder of how necessary it is to really deal with the kinds of oppression that we see. So how I got here. I had spent much of my life, I grew up in South Africa, classified as a colored, and I grew up in a community in which there was lots of violence against women. Also, lots of discrimination and oppression. But my activity was around the anti-apartheid movement. And so as a university student and beyond, the focus of my work was on racial justice. But after 1994, after the election of Nelson Mandela, and even before then, I started writing about what then we know now is called intersectionality. People had ignored the gender aspects of apartheid and had ignored the fact that under apartheid, Black South Africans were suffering tremendously, but women were suffering in ways that was invisible. So I started writing about particularly because after the election, and it was clear that women's issues were going to be marginalized, and we looked at the statistics in South Africa on rape, on violence, on poverty, etc. It was clear that we had been quote unquote liberated, but a huge proportion of South Africans were not women. And then I watched, particularly, I remember I was struck in 2005 or so, when the then president's wife, Laura Bush, was at the United Nations celebrating today, International Women's Day, and she said that they were dedicating this to the women of Afghanistan. And I decided to sort of look at Afghanistan and look at this idea of transforming the lives of women, because that was what we were supposed to do in South Africa, and I tried to see lessons and analogies. And when I looked at the evidence, I wrote a book which was published in 2012 called From Cape Town to Kabul, Rethinking Women's Human Rights. At that point, there wasn't people, there was supposed to be lots of developments to gender equality in Afghanistan. People were doing all kinds of things. I constantly ran into people who were involved in all kinds of women's projects. But I'm a skeptic. So when I looked at what had happened to women under the Taliban, the first time the Taliban was in governance, I basically looked at the reality on the ground. The fact that when I removed women and I inserted blacks, it on every level constituted gender apartheid. So it's the denial of basic civil and political rights, basic rights, education, the right to vote, being rendered invisible, being eviscerated as people. So that from my perspective, it was clear. But of course, as I said, this was a time when there was nation building, quote unquote, in Afghanistan. And then, I continued my racial justice work, gender equality work. And then Karim Benoni and others, Karim Benoni wrote a very persuasive article in the Columbia Law Review in 2022, in which she made the case. And she based her work on others who had also written on this. And if you go to Karima's article, it's very persuasive. And then I became involved with people from the Atlantic Council and the End Gender Apartheid campaign, because I do believe that the evidence is there. And what do I mean? So it's not just discrimination, just garden variety discrimination against women, which we see everywhere, including in this country. But it's more a system of oppression and a vicious system, as I said, of eviscerating people's lives, what Patricia Williams, the critical race legal scholar, calls spirit murder. And the idea is it's not just women who are suffering, it's men too, because the ethos, the idea that women are inferior or second-class citizens, are denied their rights, are not able to get engaged in creating a democratic country, it means that men too, men who feel that way. In South Africa, there were whites who opposed apartheid. They too came under the fire from the apartheid government, and similarly men in Afghanistan. So it's a comprehensive system. It's different from just discrimination. It's subjugation, oppression, and satisfies all the requirements. And when I wrote the book, what I said, very feebly, I suppose, was that there should be an international convention on the crime of the suppression of the crime of gender apartheid. We now are calling for, it's a more limited request, that in the draft convention on crimes against humanity, the crime of gender apartheid is included for all the reasons that I gave, and for complement what Naira has said. And the reason why we have to do this, naming a harm, is one of the first ways, or one of the more influential ways, that you really can get people to focus on what it is. So racial apartheid is, we all know racial apartheid is the worst epithet you can make for people, calling them racists. But gender apartheid, well, not but, and gender apartheid should become that epithet. We should really recognize that by calling this what it is, we can create the conditions for people to be able to live dignified lives. So my quest is a moral quest, a philosophical one. We live in a world in which there are many, many issues. The world is littered with all kinds of problems. But this is the problem that I think we have the evidence. So I'm asking the Sixth Committee to do so. The second is the moral one. It's the empirical one. This is not a flimsy case. The evidence is there. As I said, I won't go through all the civil and political rights that's being violated. I won't go through the nature of oppression, subjugation, and so on that is happening. And then the third is the legal one. As I said, that calling it, naming it, also creates all kinds of possibilities. It creates educational possibilities. I remember during the anti-apartheid campaign, which was a global campaign, when I came to the United States as a graduate student in the mid-'80s, I would go to high schools, to colleges, to bar associations, everywhere. Everybody spoke about racial apartheid and everybody knew the name of Nelson Mandela. And it was a global human rights campaign. And my wish is that we cannot sit by and have the possibility of doing something and not do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's great having your perspective and putting this into historical context. And I think you answered a question that's on the minds of so many is, this is not just discrimination that you see everywhere, saying that the evidence is there, that this is a system of oppression and subjugation. And as you said, now's the time to act. And on that note, I'd like to move to Malala. You have been one of the most influential voices who have been calling on the world to support Afghan girls and women. And you have been calling on the world to recognize what is happening right now as gender apartheid and make it a crime. You also noted back in December when you delivered your Nelson Mandela lecture that there are so many crises that are happening in parallel around the world right now. Do you feel that the world is listening right now? And something you also mentioned before, you are not someone from Afghanistan, you're someone who doesn't bring a legal background to this. Why have you focused your voice on this issue right now?
Hello, everyone. I would like to thank all of you for your presence today. It means so much to me that we have human rights experts, government officials, and also the incredible Afghan women and girls here with us today. It is a true moment of solidarity. This is the International Women's Day, and I hope that on this day, we make a commitment that we are determined that the world will not turn its back on the girls and women of Afghanistan. For them, gender apartheid is now a life of fear and shrinking opportunity every single day. It's hard for some of us to wrap our heads around it, to picture what does the gender apartheid mean? I would like to remind you of the pandemic, when we were all stuck in lockdowns. Remember those times when we were in the four walls and we could not go outside, we could not walk, we could not go to work. Children were not in schools, they were stuck at home. Well, the world moved to a normal life within a short period of time. But that lockdown has not ended for the Afghan women. From August 2021, it has continued. So now let's zoom out and imagine what that life under a gender apartheid looks like for Afghan women and girls right now. It means that they cannot do simple things like go to a school, go to see a doctor, walk, and work. And if they do so, they are severely punished. Women, of course, face so many challenges around the world, from violence to oppression. And you wonder that there must be systems in place in their country to protect them. But the Afghan women and girls are facing the worst of all of those oppressions, where those who are meant to protect them are the ones who oppress them. It is the people who claim to be their leaders and claim to be their government. They are the ones who are bringing these oppressive laws to systematically deny human rights to the women of Afghanistan. So where do the women of Afghanistan go? Where do the girls of Afghanistan go? And at the very heart of this barbaric oppression is the fact that the Taliban have made girlhood illegal. And they have banned girls from completing their education. This is a cause very close to my heart. It happened to me when I was 11 years old in a valley up in the north of Pakistan. Today, I'm glad that I have finished my school and I'm a university graduate. But when I see it repeating in a whole country where millions of girls will never be able to see a classroom again, it puts me in a state of outrage. It makes me angry. Afghanistan is the only country in the world that forbids girls from completing their school. And this is not just an arbitrary edict. The Taliban know exactly what they are doing. This is a highly calculated policy of oppression. And they have figured it out that in order to oppress women and deny them not just a right to live their life right now, but also to deny them a future, ban them from education, never let them learn. That is the foundation of oppressing the women and girls in Afghanistan, and the Taliban know it correctly. And the world is sort of putting it aside as if this is not the most important issue. I think this is the most important issue if we really want to challenge the Taliban, if we really want to challenge their ideology. Because girls in Afghanistan are not just having their childhood stolen, they're having their future stolen as well. I'm here today because I want to stand in solidarity with all the Afghan women and girls who have risked their lives for their rights. And we have no excuse to not be loud and clear, to stand in solidarity with them. As you've heard from Naira, the women and girls in Afghanistan are not afraid. And they also have no choice. To be able to live a life in dignity, they have no choice but to speak. And this is important that we as a global community stand with them. Because if we are willing to show that we are looking away from the Afghan women, it sends a devastating message, not just to the women and girls in Afghanistan, but also to girls everywhere. We are telling them that you are less human, that your education and your rights can be bartered away or compromised for political convenience. We are telling them that your education and your rights are not a priority. So that is why I am in this fight, and I'm doing everything that I can to rally others alongside us. And that is why I think this should be an issue for all of us who say, we care about women, we care about women's rights.
Thank you, Malala. And it's a very important point that you mentioned there, that this is not just, it is about the girls and women of Afghanistan, but it is also sending that very dangerous message to the girls and women everywhere, that the world is not doing enough. And on that note, Dorothy, going to you, in 2023, following a mission to Afghanistan, the working group released a joint statement with the special rapporteur in Afghanistan deeming the situation a gender apartheid. More recently, the working group also issued a submission to UN member states urging the codification of gender apartheid in the Crimes Against Humanity Treaty. Why does the working group believe that this potential treaty is a priority? And why is the framing of gender apartheid important in the current context?
Thank you so much. Muchísimas gracias, Tashakor. It's truly an honor to be here in this panel and sharing with you some ideas as to why. Why is it a priority for the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls to have gender apartheid explicitly codified as a crime against humanity? I would say at least based on two reasons. One is that, as has been said, we have the facts, we have the empirical reality, the evidence of what women and girls are living in Afghanistan and other parts of the world, what they are living here outside of their country as well, and how their struggle continues. We know, as has been said, that it's the only country in the world where the right to education for women and girls over 12 years of age is prohibited. Right to work, right to access to health, access to justice, freedom of association, freedom of expression. So the gender apartheid concept is not just a theoretical construct or a legal abstraction. It's the lived reality of millions of women and girls today. Second point is that this empirical reality has an answer already with the legal tools that we have, although it's not sufficient. But we know with what we have constructed over the last 80 years and thinking today on International Women's Day on human rights law instruments, all of them that prohibit discrimination, the basic principles of the UN Charter being equality and non-discrimination, and how this prohibition is clear. So we know that this is a violation of international human rights law. And what we are saying is it also has to be recognized as a crime against humanity. And this is precisely because the legal tools that we have today, while they point to the very clear fact that this is a violation, not only to the right of equality and non-discrimination as a core principle, but also to these other rights that I enumerated, civil and political rights, as was said before, the whole range of human rights, economic, social, cultural rights, right to development, the right to the future of women and girls, as was said before. So we have this, but we don't have specific tools to actually frame and identify this mass nature, this state-sponsored, institutionalized, and systematic oppression and subjugation. So this is more than just the sum of individual experiences of discrimination. This is something that we are saying as working group, this is qualitatively different. And if we look at the existing legal definitions of apartheid, both under the Convention on the Suppression and Prevention of Apartheid and the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, we see that, as was pointed out before, there are very clear similarities. Inhumane acts committed in the context of an institutionalized system of oppression of one group over another with the objective of maintaining that regime. And this is what we are seeing here. This institutionalized system in law, in practice, in policy, edict after edict, more than 80 edicts harshly enforced that are discriminating on the basis of gender, on the basis of being a woman or a girl. Of course, with experiences of intersectional discrimination, some girls and women will be affected in different and possibly more serious ways than others, but this is affecting the half of humanity. And this does send a message, and therefore the importance of the other point, why to frame it as gender apartheid. To be very clear about naming it, identifying, understanding its elements better, and to trigger a reaction by the international community. This is a test to the multilateral system. Where are we going to draw the red line? And this is not only directed, even not primarily directed to the de facto Taliban authorities. This is directed to all of us and to the international community. What are states going to do to prevent this, to combat it? It's a legal obligation to do it. It's not only a moral quest also, but it's a legal obligation to do so. So I would probably end by saying, very respectfully to Dr. Said, I hope he's not a skeptic anymore at this point, but if he is, or to anyone else who still is, I don't think the question is so much why gender apartheid, but why not? Why? Why wouldn't we have a figure that adequately identifies this and that allows us to combat it with everything that we have and to place gender equality at the center, because it's not only Afghan women and girls, and this is already a sufficient cause to do so, but it is also women and girls worldwide. This is to fight against the global gender backlash, and we are obliged to do so urgently. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. A test for multilateralism and where do we draw that red line? Very important points there. And I think that brings us to the next question. I'm also very conscious that we are running a bit late here, so we're going to have a very brief discussion. I would love to hear everyone's thoughts here on a question that I think is on the minds of many, and to the point that you just made, Dorothy. Is there anything that the world can do right now? I mean, how likely is it that this push to codify gender apartheid, will it make a difference in the near term on the lives of girls and women in Afghanistan? Why should we focus so much energy on legal codification when we might be able to do other things that could bring about more immediate benefit? I'll start with you, Malala, if you could.
In my opinion, this should not be an either-or situation. Both measures are important. We need to ensure that we are meeting the urgent and immediate needs of Afghan women. That includes solidarity with them. That includes supporting alternative education and work opportunities for them. At Malala Fund, we are helping some organizations who are secretly running schools. They're providing online digital learning platforms, lessons on radios, or through SMS and social media. I think all of these things are important. At the same time, I think there is such an important role to play for students, for feminist campaigners, and for religious leaders and media to ensure that they are building a public momentum and that they are building pressure on their leaders to take it into their top priorities. It goes both ways. We want to push leaders as well to make it their priority. But there is a huge impact of a public narrative as well. And I would just like it to end with one note. Why is it okay for girls to be banned from completing their schools? I think this should already be an international crime. It is so easy for us to show sympathy with a girl who was stopped from school, or it is so easy for us to show sympathy with a girl who gets attacked, but we don't take the right measures to ensure that it never happens again. Why should more girls put their lives at risk to fight for this human right of being in a school? So I hope that banning girls from an education will become an international crime, and those who commit this crime will be held accountable, and those who sympathize with such acts will also be held accountable, and that leaders feel the pressure and an obligation that it is their responsibility to protect this right no matter what, and that there is no compromise on protecting the right to education and the right to work, and other basic needs for women are a top priority. So this is my call.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Penny, I believe you have something to say.
Yes, I want to agree with Malala that it doesn't have to be an either or. I mean, feminists can walk and chew gum at the same time. The question about legalization, law is such an important instrument of social change. So even though you do the other things, and of course that's being done, law signals the idea that this is of such great international concern that we are codifying it. So the signaling of the importance, the fact that law is respected for the most part, it builds in, as well as Malala just mentions, accountability. Because law is about not just about stating the problem, but also law provides some kind of solution which puts into the proposition the idea that there has to be accountability and you can pressurize. So I think it's very, very important. And then the spin-off of law. If one looks at, for example, major lawsuits, there's an educational component. People talk about it. It gives, it has a cultural message, it has an educational message. And when I think about the anti-apartheid movement, the boycotts, for example, just captured, as I said earlier, captured many, many people across the globe. So I think that law, once the convention on the suppression of the crime of racial apartheid was passed in 1977, the anti-apartheid movement really took off. So yes, I think you can center law, not because it's the most important thing, but in conjunction with all those other activities. It really is very, very significant.
Thank you. I would like to open the floor now so we can start hearing from you. And again, a reminder for our audience joining us online, please send in your questions. I believe we have a couple of interventions here, starting with the Chargé d'Affaires of the Permanent Mission of Afghanistan to the UN, as well as the Ambassador of Iceland. If we can just get the mics to you first. Thank you.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to begin by expressing our deep appreciation on behalf of the people of Afghanistan to Atlantic Council, IPI, Malala Fund, and all co-sponsors and co-organizers of this event, very timely, including Malta and Mexico, and all of those participants who are attending, and particularly to the distinguished panelists and for their very insightful briefings and presentations. It's a very opportune time. First, on this International Day of Women, we are expressing solidarity to the women and girls in Afghanistan. It's very timely, and we appreciate that. And secondly, about the importance of the topic that we are discussing, the gender apartheid. I totally agree with all of you that, unfortunately, the gender apartheid in Afghanistan is an institutionalized policy of the Taliban regime. And I fully agree with the distinguished panelists that there are evidence. And what we need is we have to pursue at different international level platforms, including the UN, the Sex Committee, how we can codify this one, and how we can use other platforms like ICG and ICC to hold the Taliban accountable to end these systematic erasure of women. And unfortunately, what we need is an international consensus, how we can rally all the support behind this solidarity, behind this support to the people of Afghanistan. Unfortunately, what is lacking is that an international united approach about the engagement and about the international engagement with the Taliban. And I'm glad that Secretary General and also the United Nations, UNAMA, and the Special Coordinator's recent report, all of them are signs that there is an international attention focus on Afghanistan, and Taliban are unfortunately taking advantage of this unity. And when they are meeting with the OIC Islamic countries, they are trying to justify their policies based on their false interpretation of Islam and Sharia law, which is totally not correct. And when they are meeting with international partners, they are trying to justify that based on their culture, which is also wrong and false. And we have always been stating this, that what Taliban are doing in Afghanistan is neither Islamic nor cultural. It's not reflecting Afghanistan's culture. And but as Afghans, I'm very glad, and we are all very proud that today Afghan women are very vocal, very resilient, and they are fighting for their rights. Naira is one of the millions of Afghan women, and that today they are fighting for their rights. And not only outside Afghanistan, but also inside Afghanistan, there are women Protestant groups that they are every day taking on the streets, trying to defy against the Taliban's policies. And I once again thank you all for your very insightful remarks, and also appreciate the international solidarity and support for pursuing how to codify gender apartheid in Afghanistan. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. And firstly, of course, happy International Women's Day. And I really want to thank all the speakers and organizers for this thought-provoking event. I represent a country, Iceland, that has placed human rights and notably women's rights really at the core of our foreign policy. And in the past couple of years, we have repeatedly called for the global attention for the fight of Afghan women, for their rights and dignity, including through amplifying their voices in the international arena. And for us, listening and working with Afghan women is obviously the key here. And I really want to thank you, Ms. Kohistani, for your bravery and for your personal account here today. And I don't know if you have an opinion of what a small country like Iceland, small country, but still, can do to further your cause and our common cause, of course, for the respect of the human rights of Afghan women. On the issue of gender apartheid, we really observe with keen interest and take very seriously the arguments of the working group on discrimination against women, along with, of course, the special rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Afghanistan. Namely that the de facto authorities' ethics, policies, and enforcement methods constitute gender persecution and an institutional framework of gender apartheid. And we certainly hear the calls, including here today, for the recognition of gender apartheid as a crime against humanity, and we really believe that merits further discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. I think we have a bit of time for any more questions, interventions from the floor. Yes, please. And if I could ask everyone to please introduce yourself, and if we could keep the questions brief so we can try and get to hear as much as possible from our panelists.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I just want to begin by thanking all of our panelists for their inspiring words, and I can think of no better place to be on International Women's Day than here with all of you, and to thank Ms. Kohistani in particular for your bravery in sharing your personal experiences with all of us. My name is Christina Hureyes. I'm the chair of the United Nations practice group at the law firm Foley Hoag. We work with states on matters before the UN on questions of international law. We've been working very closely with Atlantic Council and supported by the Malala Fund on how we can actually take action here today. And that is through the draft language that Professor Andrews spoke about and Mrs. Estrada Tank spoke about on including gender apartheid in the current draft Crimes Against Humanity Convention that is being negotiated right now as we speak. So this is an opportune moment. We thank Mexico for taking the lead and Malta for adopting our language. We have 6 other states that have supported this initiative, and you all in the room, you have the power and the authority to affect change. And that is to endorse the language that has been proposed in our white paper, which has been circulated broadly to recognize and codify the crime of gender apartheid. We have ambassadors in the room. We have legal advisors and experts. We call on you to take the appropriate action and endorse that language. So perhaps Mrs. Estrada Tank or Professor Andrews can say a little bit more about the negotiation efforts and who they would get in contact. But any of the Atlantic Council lawyers, myself, we've all been working hard on that draft language, and we'd be happy to share the white paper with all of you. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions in the room? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Harry Reese. I'm a law student at Columbia Law School and a student scholar with the Institute for Global Politics. It's really such an honor and a privilege to hear from all of you. And my question is about what Professor Andrews was discussing around intersectionality. And hearing this discussion, I think of the history in the United States during Reconstruction, of the abolition of slavery and the passage of the 15th Amendment guaranteeing the right of suffrage to formerly enslaved Black men, which excluded Black women from the right to suffrage and who didn't earn that right until 1920. And so I'm curious, in the act of codification of a crime of gender apartheid, which I think is extremely compelling given the situation that was described in Afghanistan, to what extent gender crimes include or exclude crimes targeting members of the LGBTQ community, and how trans rights and LGBTQ rights more broadly, which resonate differently in different parts of the world, should be understood to be included within the crime of gender apartheid and more broadly within gender-based discrimination.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to turn to our panelists. Penny, if you'd like to go ahead. Please.
Yes, thank you. I will leave the discussion of the negotiations to Professor Estrada Tank, because I've not been part of it. Yes, your question is an interesting one. I think that in the global as well as the American context, race has always had primacy over gender. That's just a fact. If you look, you mentioned the fact that Black men got the vote and women only got the vote later. And there was an abolitionist who spoke about, all the women in the country are white and all the Blacks are men. It puts Black women in a very specific intersectional space. So I do think that part of this is recognizing that in a community, you also have people, and that's the intersectionality part. So thank you for bringing that up. It's a global problem too. In South Africa, as I mentioned, race has taken primacy. And I've written an article which talks about the stepchild of national liberation. Women were the stepchildren and gender equality. With respect to LGBTQ people, I think that if you look at the language, and Professor Estrada Tank can talk about that again some more, but if you look at the language, gendered groups, that includes members of the LGBTQ community. So I think that their language encompasses that and deals with the specific problem that you mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I would agree with that. And actually, in the guidance document that the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls issued just a few weeks ago, and this was distributed to all member states, we are hoping that this will be helpful in the negotiation process, and that you can take from their argumentation and motivation for your positions. We are saying that the definition can be modeled, let's say, after the definition of apartheid as it exists. What I mentioned, inhumane acts in the context of institutionalized system of oppression based on gender. So this is because gender includes sexual characteristics and the social constructions. The aim is actually to be as inclusive as possible. What the reality is telling us now is that the gravest problem is concerning women and girls. And then, of course, within women and girls, obviously, lesbian women. So you have those cross-cutting factors and intersectional experiences of discrimination. But our view would be, in a way, looking at what already exists in terms of the Office of the Prosecutor's policy on gender persecution, a crime that is already recognized as a crime against humanity, which speaks precisely of this broad concept of gender. So we would propose to follow that lead, and in codifying gender apartheid, to adopt that position. I mean, we don't want this, there's a prohibition for this to happen to anyone, right? For any institutionalized system to oppress people in this way. What I do think is also important, turning to some of the previous interventions in codifying gender apartheid, is first of all that the Afghan women themselves, many are asking for it. So I think that that's a very powerful reason to think very seriously about it, right? So that's one, placing the woman at the center. And second is that if this were achieved, then we're really sending a very clear message that patriarchy is not allowed. And this would be not only in terms of a crime against humanity and individual criminal responsibility towards individual persons, but also state responsibility. Some of you mentioned possibility to argue this before the International Court of Justice and state responsibility. So it's also sending a message that this is an absolute prohibition under international law. And that, I think, also, apart from the fact of showing solidarity between women, it also empowers men and boys, feminist men and boys that are supporting the women. We were told this by the women we met with in Afghanistan. I'm here because my father brought me, and he's supporting me and what I'm doing, and in meeting with you, and in continuing my protests. So if we are very clear that this is not allowed, it also sends this meaningful message to everyone.
Thank you. As we're nearing the end here of our session, I wanted to call on Her Excellency Ambassador Vanessa Fraser, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Malta to the UN, who will be delivering her closing remarks now. Thank you.
Thank you. As we come to a close of this impactful event, I wanted to thank the organizers and express how deeply moved and inspired I am by your stories. I hope you are persuaded. Two young women who refuse to be silenced. Your stories must ignite a fire within us to strive for a world where every girl can realize her full potential, where every woman is treated with dignity and respect. We must meet your courage with solidarity and action. This distinguished panel has evidenced the harrowing reality of gender apartheid in its systematic and brutal oppression. It destroys hope, it shatters dreams, and persecutes women and girls for walking in the park, for learning, for working, and for having any agency in shaping their lives and the future of their country. We are gathered today on International Women's Day across the street from the UN Security Council, where it is our responsibility as member states to amplify your voices and advocate for change. We cannot be complacent. We must be relentless in pursuing justice and equality, and unwavering in our commitment to dismantle gender apartheid. As a Security Council member, Malta, we're very proud of this year. We will stand up for women's rights and their defenders. We must honor the UN Charter and reaffirm our faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women, and of nations large and small. To you, Malala and Nayera, to those present, I pledge Malta's solidarity. We believe gender apartheid should be a crime against humanity. We believe that the codification of the crime of gender apartheid will enable victims and survivors, present and future, to hold perpetrators to account for the totality of crimes committed by systemized oppression, which the crime of gender persecution alone does not capture. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now we're going to hear from Mitra Mehran, who is an Afghan expert and activist. If you could join us, thank you.
Thank you so much from the STEM panelists for very fruitful discussions. I'm going to take a few moments and share the story of a young girl from Afghanistan. I hope I can do justice to it. The video played at the beginning of this event is part of the Inside Afghanistan Gender Apartheid Project with the civic engagement in the South Asia Center at the Atlantic Council. What my colleagues, Sahar Halimzai, Marika, and I realized in our engagements, in our work over the last year, was that the depth of atrocities endured by the women and girls in Afghanistan through the violent enforcement of these decrees issued by the Taliban was not truly understood, or was so poorly understood.
even less understood is how so many of the Taliban decrees break international law, that they are committing crimes against humanity. They are seen as words or policies or numbers or political football, but the daily reality is hard to imagine, and we saw it in Noida John's story. This project is about creating the space for women of Afghanistan and girls to tell their own stories to the world, and I hope the world listens. This is Sadia's story. My name is Sadia, and I am 14 years old. When the Taliban closed my school doors, they closed the doors on my hopes for my future. I grew up listening to stories about the Taliban to me. They were as far away as they are to you now. I have loved the school since kindergarten. I loved putting on my school uniform and packing my school bag every morning. I used to look forward to it. I loved spending time with my friends. I wonder if I will ever have that feeling again. If I will ever be able to put my uniform on. What used to be my right today is just a wish. A wish that I don't know will ever come true, because the world has forgotten me and all Afghan girls like me. They have left us prey to the brutal claws of the Taliban. Is it true that you have forgotten me? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mitra. Thank you, everyone. And it's time to wrap up what has been such an important discussion today. And there obviously is a lot of work still to be done. And as we've heard from everyone today, we all have a role to play to ensure prevention, to ensure accountability, to ensure that the girls and the women of Afghanistan are not abandoned and are not forgotten. And I wanted to leave you with the words of the brave and fearless Nargis Mohammadi, the 2023 Nobel Peace Laureate, who wrote a letter that we recently published at CNN from behind bars, from Evin prison. She said that the time has come to recognize gender apartheid as a crime against humanity. Women in Afghanistan, in Iran, and elsewhere, she said, are awaiting the immediate attention and action of the United Nations for what has become inevitable. The time for criminalizing gender apartheid has come. It is time to rise and stand. Thank you very much. If I could just ask everyone to please remain seated for a couple